Hey TCS TV viewers, it's Dave from the Camera Store. Today we are doing a battle of the sixes. The Canon R6 and the Nikon Z6 Mark II are two mid-range full-frame mirrorless cameras that are often compared to one another. They have a lot of similarities, but there are some differences between the two. So we're going to battle out between these two with regards to autofocus, frames per second, all kinds of different technical specs, and see which one comes out the winner in the battle of the sixes. Let's talk about the size and design of both of these cameras. And right off the bat, they are similar sized cameras. They have a slightly different feel to it, of course. The Nikon is a little bit thinner, but it's a little bit heavier. It's 705 grams compared to 680 grams for the Canon. Now they both have a 3.69 million dot electronic viewfinder with really nice eye relief. However, one nice thing about the Canon, it does go up to 120 frames per second refresh rate. So if you are shooting sports and action, you're going to have a smoother playback through the electronic viewfinder. Aside from electronic viewfinders, Nikon and Canon both have an articulating rear screen. Now with Nikon, it's a more simple design where it just flips up and down, but it does have the ability to articulate off to the side, which is my preferred method. I like the Canon a little bit better that way. As we go through the dials and controls of the camera, they're all really well laid out. Both these cameras do have dual card slots, which I really like having that option. Now with the Canon, it's dual SD cards that are both UHS 2 compatible, where the Nikon has gone with a single SD card that's UHS 2 compatible, but also a CF Express card. Now I really like the CF Express cards. They're very robust and they're very fast, but I don't know if they're needed on a camera like this that can shoot up to 14 frames a second. Canon's doing really well with UHS 2 cards, and it can still do 20 frames a second with them. So I'd rather have two of the exact same card slots in my camera. And both these cameras have about the same battery life. You're looking at about 400 shots. Now I'm getting a lot more than that out of both these cameras, so I kind of use it as a guideline. I do always carry a secondary battery with me just in case though. Now that being said, I can charge these cameras through the USB-C ports, which is quite nice. However, with a Canon, you need the power delivery unit, a much more powerful USB cable to do it, not just straight off your regular computer. Now the one thing that's a big difference for me, and I used to hate it about Nikon, is that the on-off switch was built into the shutter button. Now you always have to turn the camera off, and I always worried about accidentally knocking the camera off by accident. But now with mirrorless cameras, I really do appreciate that because it comes back to the battery life thing. Typically with mirrorless cameras now, I turn the camera on, take my pictures, turn the camera off to conserve battery power. And it's much more convenient to have it on the shutter button, where Canon puts the power button way out of the way. And their logic is that once you turn the camera on, you don't have to worry about accidentally knocking it off. Now it's a personal choice, and I've switched sides on this back from the Nikon DSLR days to the new mirrorless. I do prefer it on the shutter button now. Both cameras do have very responsive touchscreens, which I find myself using a lot. However, I do like the Canon's placement of it, which allows me to work it from much different angles than I can with the Nikon. Another big difference that I find personally when I'm switching back and forth between brands is where the control dial is. On the Nikon, it's in front of the shutter button, which I don't really care for. It's not my personal take. I like the Canon much better with that button put above the shutter button here. That way I'm conscientiously making a change or I'm not accidentally bumping it. That's a personal preference as well. That sort of brings me to this whole point of these cameras. They're both really well designed with some slight differences in how they are designed. And you really owe it to yourself to put it in your hands, try it out and see what suits you better, what feels better. They truly are an extension of who you are and your hand. Sounds so cliche and I apologize for that, but you really have to get your hands on these cameras. They're both very well designed. Let's talk about autofocus. Now, I've set up kind of an experiment here. It's far from scientific, although it is somewhat controlled. So our setup here are the two cameras as close as we could put them side by side with the latest 70-200 2.8s shooting at f2.8. The same settings on a same tripod. Now, we're fortunate enough that we have the Vanguard VO234AB3T Plus. This is a very cool tripod that has a nice trick feature, allows you to put the center column sideways, and it comes supplied with an additional mount, so you can mount two cameras side by side. Now I was hoping to have a friend join me on this shoot so we could each man a camera. However, it turns out I don't have any friends. And Drew's paid to be here. So I'm going to put him on a scooter and I'm going to send him towards the camera here at breakneck speed and hopefully see which camera is going to outperform the other when it comes to autofocus. So this is where the Canon should really shine. When it comes to autofocus points alone, we're looking at 6,072 of them compared to 273 on the Nikon. Now what I'm finding in my test results here, pass after pass, is that Canon is picking up Drew's face much earlier on than the Nikon is and tracking subjects in much further distance. I'm finding the Canon is a lot stickier on the subject matter and is a lot more active compared to the Nikon. The Canon has the ability to shoot up to 20 frames per second when you switch to electronic shutter. Now this is great for those very fleeting moments in sports. You're going to really appreciate those extra frames. After multiple passes on the scooter and a whole bunch of different setting changes of the cameras to achieve the best results, what I'm finding is that the Nikon certainly does focus pretty decent, but on the more aggressive autofocusing subjects like Drew on his scooter, the Canon is outperforming it. Now both of these cameras feature a full frame sensor, which is great to have. Now I thought this would be an easy win for Nikon because it's a 24 megapixel next to Canon's measly 20 megapixel sensor. But truth be known, these sensors are so close together, it's very tough to pick an outright winner. The extra resolution on the Nikon isn't really noticeable. Canon has a very weak aliasing filter put on the R6, so it actually resolves great quality detail. So that 4 extra megapixels really is meaningless. Now as far as ISO goes and noise and all this kind of stuff, they're too close to call. They're very, very similar sensors. After comparing these two cameras in a bunch of different categories, it's really tough to pick an outright winner. The reason is they're both very good cameras. They both offer great sensors with great dynamic range and high ISO capabilities and more than enough resolution to print anything I really want to print. The big differences between these cameras come down in their functionality and in their autofocus performance, and that's where Canon does take a little bit of a lead that way. But if your style of photography doesn't involve a higher frame rate, then both are going to be very good options. The bigger option I'm finding is that, are you coming from a Nikon ecosystem already or a Canon system? Are you going to adapt some older lenses to the new bodies, or are you going to be starting from scratch? These are big questions you kind of have to figure out what's going to suit your best needs. But also, you really need to get your hands on these cameras and feel which one works best for you. So overall, if it was me coming to the market fresh without any history or any existing lenses, I would choose the Canon just because I like the extra frame rate and I love that autofocus capability of it. For me, I find that the Canon is worth the extra price. In Canada, we're looking at about a $600 difference, but you really owe it to yourself to take a look at both of these cameras and both of their systems to see what's going to be the right fit for you. I, of course, want to know what you guys think between these two cameras. Is there a feature set or a function that you like one over the other? Are there certain ergonomic features that you like between the two models yourself? Now, if you're coming in fresh, I want to know what you guys would choose yourself. Leave the comments down below. Follow us both on Instagram and please subscribe. Hit the notification bell and we'll catch you again for the next episode.
Sure.
Okay.
Do it.
Hey, thanks for sticking around and watching this episode. If you want to check out our other content, click up here. And if you are Canadian and you want to shop local, check out thecamerastore.com down here.